Hey everyone, today we have the tier list for patch 17.5b. We have a couple of changes since last week. A couple of developments have occurred because it's come to that point in the set where people are kind of perfecting things and also kind of seeing what's happening in the meta in the first week and then trying to counter it in the second week. So right now, I think there's one comp that's like pretty standout. It's going to be the Stargazer Xayah comp. This comp is super hard forceable in my opinion. If you ever get like a semi-decent Stargazer, we'll talk about how to do that in a minute when we go over every single comp. But I think if you really want to just master one comp, that's one way to go for it. Gnar Printer comp is really nice as well. 2 Tanky Samira, if you get the augment, is pretty much auto take and just forcing Samira. And then Vex Fast 9, if you just find yourself in a win streak and you slammed a bunch of random items, going into Vex Fast 9 is very nice because you really just need Rage Blade for her. And then you could itemize everyone else kind of with whatever you built from the early game. After that, in the A tier, Brawler Yi's actually doing pretty solidly right now. I'm actually quite surprised by this, but I've been seeing it have some great results. Vanguard Fast 9, another version of Fast 9, which is pretty good. It's also a bit cheaper. You go for this if you have a lot of AP items, but do not have a Rage Blade. Space Groove, solid. Emblem Dependent Dark Star, same thing. Mecha, nice if you get like a really good artifact item or an anima cash out with a really good item for the mecha. And then the new comp of the patch we have is Primordian Jinx. We'll cover how to do that in just a little bit. Everything else is still a little bit playable, but as per usual, I'd say you'd want to focus on the S and A tiers right now. But of course, if you get like Meeple emblem, like, yeah, go for Corki Riven, right? It's not going to be too bad. But for the most part, like the S and A's, this is what I would stick to. And especially since I think Xayah is pretty good, if you ever get one of the good constellations, just hard force it. You will not regret it. But let's go into each and every one of these comps. Stargazer Xayah is up first. I'm still a fan of the red buff double Kraken build on her because it gives her a lot of attack speed up front. It gives the team anti-heal, so you save an item. And then double Kraken is just always very solid on her. Kraken's just the best item. And then you don't need things like the Rage Blade. You don't need to be dependent on having a super strong front line. Like normally when I build a Rage Blade in my comps, I like taking one of the defensive combat augments. That's stuff like Second Wind, Plot Armor, things like that, because having more survivability up front means that I get to scale harder with my Rage Blade. But with this build, you don't have to actually do that. In your front line, you're going to be running a lot of different stuff. So you want to get the 3 Stargazers in. Jax and Nunu going to work out great for that. Pair that up with a Vanguard. Blitzcrank makes a lot of sense. He's a 5 cost and a nice little secondary or tertiary carry. Bastion's going to be Aatrox, gives you armor penetration for your whole team. And then Maokai, Tahm Kench, just a great pair up for anything if you are able to run them. Maokai obviously getting the Nova buff, and then Tahm Kench giving Bruiser to Maokai. And Tahm Kench is just really good in general because it helps you complete your team, gets you a lot of gold, things like that. But Tempo AD Opener is going to be the recipe for this. Serpent, Boar, or Altar Stargazer are going to be some of the best ones to do this on, and at least have one bow before you hard force this. Having none makes it really rough because some games you only get one component of your choosing, you know? Sometimes I even go games where I don't even get the one item component I need. Like let's say I want to build a Rage Blade or something like that and I just need one rod. Sometimes I just don't get that. It doesn't happen often, but you do have to prepare for it. But unfortunately for this comp, you need a lot of bows. There are like 4 bow items over here. So if you don't have at least one of them at the start of the game, how are you going to get 4 of them? Unless of course you get some item augment that pretty much gives you a ton of bows. That's unfortunately kind of the one limitation of this comp, but luckily there are 2 versions of it. Obviously you'd itemize Jhin as your other AD item holder. He uses a lot of swords, but there is a Rammus version out there. This one is a little bit weaker in my opinion, but it's still pretty solid in case Nunu and Tahm Kench are really contested, because if you just happen to roll a 2-star Rammus, you can easily switch into this version. Not as strong, but really no one's playing Rammus right now because the Meeple comp is not as strong. So great backup plan if you must, but obviously you prefer this version out here. But standard fast 8 comp, you're just rolling for pretty much, I think 3 4 costs. You have Xayah, Tahm Kench, and Nunu. And another way you could pivot out of this comp is if you have a lot more swords than bows, you could pivot into Corki. But of course, that's a worst case scenario since Xayah is in the S tier and Corki is in the B tier. But pretty much you need at least 1 Kraken plus a premium and attack speed item such as Guinsoo's or Red Buff. Flicker Blade also works there. But overall, this comp works out pretty well, and you could also play emblems with it too. Next build up we have is a Gnar Printer comp. This one, you kind of want the +1 Meeple. I'm not saying it's going to be mandatory, but it makes it a lot easier because getting to 7 Meeple is actually pretty difficult at the start of the game because you need both Corki and Rammus to hit it. And getting 2 specific 4 costs at level 7 is quite difficult, you know? So if you are level 7 on stage 3-5, if you have a Meeple emblem, like sometimes you just get a random 4 cost that you want, and in those cases, you get to super high roll, start printing with the 7 Meeple right away. When you print with 7 Meeple, you get a bunch of gold, and you're also playing 7 Meeple on the turns where you can afford to lose a few rounds because stage 3, the damage is going to be a bit lower. So it's just a really big snowball effect that can happen. But of course, if you have a lot of natural Gnars, you got all the good items for him, you got like natural Meeple start, you could get away without the emblem, you know, but the emblem definitely helps, makes things run a lot smoother. But this comp out here, you just want to be running at least 2 sniper, at least 5 Meeple. With the Meeple, you get the bastions built in with Rammus and Poppy, and then you just itemize whoever you can. In this case, it could be like Bard, Corki, Jhin, even like Karma, things like that. Pretty much whoever you have 2 start, but Gnar's going to be your main person here. So Gnar's also really good at pivoting into other attack damage comps. If you checked out my opener guide on bunnymuffins.lol/openers over here, you'll know that I talk about Gnar a bunch there, and pretty much he is just able to open for every single attack damage comp because look at his items, i.e. Deathblade, Rageblade. No matter which AD carry you're using, you could use at least one of those items. No one really uses all 3 of these that often, but Gnar is one of those rare cases. So if you need to play some AD caster, you have the IE there. If you need to play some attack speed marksman, Rageblade is there. If you need just raw AD, Deathblade is there. So pretty much Gnar just holds every important item that everyone needs. So you could easily use him as an item holder. And then if you don't get perfect items for him, or if you don't get a lot of copies of him, or you don't get a Meeple emblem, then you could just go into that other attack damage comp and have a very, very nice time. Other things you need to keep in mind when you play this is getting some shred effects. So Last Whisper, pretty good. You probably want like a Sunfire Cape on Rammus or a red buff on Corki or Morello on Bard for anti-heal. Like in this case, we have the Morello on Bard, but you don't have to have Morello. Like you just need some form of anti-heal. But some gods I recommend with this team comp is going to be Varus, Kayle, and Yasuo. Varus is nice for reroll. Obviously, you are rerolling for the Gnar. Well, not rerolling. You want like 3-star Gnar. You're not physically rerolling. You're just going for 3-star. And Varus gives a lot of duplicators sometimes. Kayle is good because she often gives either item components, and her boon is pretty nice for this comp. Yasuo is good for the hexes. He gives an attack speed hex, which is nice for Gnar. He gives a stun one that you could use for one of your other characters, which is nice. The tank ones are pretty good. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things that work with this comp. Obviously, you could play this comp with any god, but these are just some of the ones that I like a little bit more than the others. But overall, like pretty simple comp. You just play regular. Once you get to 7 Meeple, just put Gnar on the Meeple thing. Again, this is not a reroll comp. If you have Emblem, you could try to hit 7 Meeple on level 7. If not, do it on level 8. Stabilize around 2-star Rammus and 2-star Corki. And then once you get the 7 Meeple out, print the Gnars. Once you get Gnar completed, make sure you got 3 items for him. And then after that, you could level up to 9, play some legendaries, and do whatever you want after that. Another thing to know about Meeple is that when you print units with Meeple, you get gold. So again, don't be afraid to roll more aggressively than normal because there are ways to come back in the game in terms of econ. Next build up we have is Samira Reroll. Only played the 2 tanky version, the standard version just not strong enough right now. But the 2 tanky version definitely is valid. Pretty much you just run 2 Samiras, 2 Ornn, you try to get 5 Space Group in, and then you just fill in random traits. Ideally at level 9 you put in something like Shen, but it's hard to fit everything in this comp. The only units you want to run double copies of is going to be Ornn and Samira. You don't really want to do it for anyone else. And then after that, get Sniper for Samira. Jhin also gives additional armor shred that works with the Last Whisper. And then the build on her is going to be the Shojin Last Whisper Deathblade build that people have been building all the time. On your front line, Ornn is nice with the Stoneplate. You could solo frontline him if you have it. If not, just any generic tank items will do. And I like getting 3 items on him as soon as possible because he makes one of them Radiant. He just gets super tanky from that. So especially when he's 3-star, Radiant items mean a bit more. Before that, I generally try to prioritize items on Samira. In the super late game, you might have time to itemize a secondary carry, in which case you could do either Nami, Blitzcrank, or Jhin, depending on who you have 2-starred. Normally when you do 3-cost reroll, which is rolling at level 7, you don't really have time to hit legendaries, so oftentimes you will just be playing around the Nami, which is why she's itemized even though she's a 4-cost compared to Blitzcrank and Jhin, who are 5-cost. But Only really play this with 2 Tanky. I don't really recommend the standard version without it because it's just not as strong. Next build up we have is the Vex Fast 9. If you ever find yourself win streaking a lot in the early game, like at least a 7 or 8 game win streak, that's when you want to consider going Vex Fast 9. Item augments are good to kind of play into this because item augments help you win in the beginning of the game. Econ augments obviously help too, but it's a bit harder to win, but you can do a win-lose into it as long as you have a really strong econ augment. But with econ augments, I typically like playing level 8 comps, but if I have like 2 econ augments, then you could do a Fast 9. This build gets a lot of power from running the Aatrox Akali combo. This gives all the armor pen, all the magic pen, and all this critical strike that you ever need. And then you pretty much pick your carry. Whoever you hit, that's who you're carrying. And when I say hit, I mean getting 2-star. Obviously, in stage 4, you could get away with some of the 1-star, like 1-star Vex on stage 4. Most likely going to be enough if you have a 2-star tank. It could either be like Nunu or Morgana. But in the late game, if you have someone else 2-star and you still have Vex 1-star, you might want to transfer the items over to that other unit. And then once you get Vex 2, transfer items back. By the way, one very hard thing to do with this comp is get a solid front line, and I'll show you exactly how to do that right now. Obviously, if you get Nunu 2 or Morgana 2, you could just play those units as your main tank, but if you don't get these, what you can do instead is run a Maokai. Maokai is a Nova unit, so he does get help from some of the other Novas and gets a nice little effect there that makes your team a little bit more durable. But with the Maokai, you could also run Tahm Kench, who is a brawler, and just drop literally anyone else. Like, you probably don't have all the legendaries at the start of the game, right? And then you have room to kind of fit everything you want. But Tahm Kench, getting him 2-star is another great way to kind of stabilize this comp because you don't really care who your tank is. You just need some 4-cost tank, and that's one way to fit it in. Rammus obviously is another option as a bastion before you get something like Shen. But honestly, like Blitzcrank and Shen are not tanky at all. They are going to be damage units this set, so that's why you just need any 4-cost tank, but literally you could use all of them. Once you get that, then you want to focus on your other units because getting just 5-cost units to 2-star is not enough to win the game. You need one of the 4-cost tanks at 2-star. If not, your team just shreds like paper. Next build up we have are the A tiers. Brawler Yi, still a solid comp out there. Edge Knight is pretty much mandatory on him. And for some reason, Yi still scams a lot. That's kind of why he's still played. But this comp is still very easy to play also, and it just loves emblems. You could use a lot of different combinations of them. Bruiser emblem obviously going to be the best one, but whenever you take random emblem, oftentimes you get something that works in this comp, and that's why people kind of go for this a bunch, even if it's not like the best emblem that's like handpicked for it. Handpicked, I would say, is either like Marauder or Brawler, but Nova and Challenger are playable. It's not great, but it's playable. But pretty much in this build, you just focus on Yi items, just get the Edge of Night and Giant Slayer. Third item doesn't really matter too much. On Tahm Kench, I like having the utility on him, Even Shroud plus Sunfire. Third item doesn't matter that much. I typically build Crown Guards or Protector's Vow, not because I like them, but because if you get a Rod or a Tier, it's a great way to like use them up in this comp because you don't really need it on anyone else because Kindred uses all attack speed items, and once you get Fiora in the super late game, she uses pretty much only sword items. So if you ever get a Rod or a Tier, just turn them into a tank item for Tahm Kench and don't really think too hard about it. But if you add like Pandora's items or something like that, maybe you could build something like a Spirit Visage or maybe something like a Warmogs on him. That could probably make him pretty tanky too. But pretty much just play this comp if you have a good win streak and an AD opener, because this comp definitely does a lot better from high health rather than having low health, because it does eventually fall off in the super late game. So if you like lose streaked and then tried to stabilize with Brawler Yi, you're going to lose out to all the super fast 9 players or the Anma squad players because they are just going to spike harder. And if you only have like 2 lives left, you just face them twice and then you are out of the game. So definitely play this from a higher health opener, but obviously you got to do what you got to do. Like everyone tries to live, right? Like no one's out there like purposely doing a lose streak without Anma squad, right? But it's just something you do have to keep in mind when playing it. Vanguard Fast 9 follows the same rules as the other Fast 9 comp, except this one, the tank line's a bit easier to play around with because you play around with all the Vanguards. You could also do Leona Printer if you want. I don't think it's that good, but it is solid. But 2-star Alawi is a great bridge to get into 2-star Nunu later, just because she's going to be a nice little 3-cost Vanguard. And when you're running 4 Vanguard, you could run something like Nasus or Leona before you get the Nunu and Blitzcrank. She just gets a lot of power, you know, a lot of tankiness, which is what you need from your team. She also gives Shepherd, so when you do eventually get Sona, you could pair it up with the Meepsie to get 3 Shepherd, get the nice little buff. It's nothing that crazy, but it's just like a free little buff that you can kind of mesh with your team with. But in the back line, we have Bard and Vex as the other main carries. Bard is good because you get Conduit with Mordekaiser. Vex is just good in general with a strong front line, which, I mean, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units in the front line. Ha 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 ha. I said 6, 7, right? But Sona is good in the back line with the Jeweled Gauntlet Double Nashers build. You don't have to get this exact item build. If you can't get this, just build like a Shojin or blue buff on her. That's going to work out pretty well. But best thing to do with this comp is going to be Tempo AP Opener. So if you get AP item augments, they don't have to be like literal AP augments, but if you just take like random item components and they just happen to be AP, that's going to be a good sign to kind of go for this comp. Obviously, like AP item is like relative because obviously bow and belt aren't actually AP items, but combined they are. So obviously, if you build the Nashor's Tooth, like that is considered an AP item, even though the components are not. Just keep in mind, build the Jeweled Gauntlet before you build the Nashers because Nashers is useless unless you have crit. You could also get crit if you take something like Jeweled Lotus. That's another way to kind of get into this, which is also a pretty nice augment in this build. But usually when you play Fast 9, it's item augment at the start of the game, maybe like an econ for the other one or something to help you win streak with instead. And then you just have like 80 plus health on stage 4-1. Maybe you could lose 1 or 2 rounds or even more than that. And then go to level 9, roll down like 50 plus gold, hit something 2-star. Doesn't have to be everything, but it could be something, right? Econ back up, roll down again when it makes sense, and then finish your 2 stars that way. That's pretty much how this is going to go. Next build up we have is Space Groove. Space Groove is going to work pretty much only with the emblem. Like you could do 5 and 7 Space Groove. Like 7 is going to be better in the late game, but you require more unit slots. But just make sure you have traits that activate your team. So for your team here, you want to be focused on Nami, Nunu, Riven, and Blitzcrank. So what are the traits for those? Vanguard, well, Nunu and Blitzcrank cover that. Space Groove, that's going to cover Blitzcrank and Nami. Replicator, Nami and Pantheon. Timebreaker, Pantheon and Riven. So that's kind of why this comp works out pretty decently. And you also have the option to duo tank with Tahm Kench and Nunu. If you get a lot of mana items, itemize Nunu. If you get a lot of regular tank items, itemize Tahm Kench. I tend to like Nunu a bit more in this comp because Nunu and Riven can kind of duo tank as well, so you aren't as reliant on the Tahm Kench. But obviously Tahm Kench is just good to have in general because he gives you a lot of gold. I think he's just one of the most broken like mid-game units in the game. Mid to late game, I should say. Just because he's pretty tanky on his own and he just helps out your team a ton. But yeah, Space Groove emblem's pretty good on Riven. I mean, she's just the best holder of it. The Jeweled Gauntlet Double Nashers backline makes a lot of sense on Nami. You just want her to cast a lot, and Critical Strike is always good for casters who don't have innate crit. And then BT Titan's Resolve, you need Titans on Riven because you want her to not be able to get CC'd, and Titans is one way to do that. Quicksilver is another way, but you want her to be more resilient. That's why you prefer the Titans over that. And then BT is just good to, again, help her health out. If you don't have a BT, you could build something like Sterix or Hand of Justice. Anything that kind of helps her survive a little bit is just going to be really, really nice on her. But overall, this build is great, but it's just really dependent on the emblem, which is why I don't particularly like this unless I just high roll it. And by high roll it, I mean like you're playing your regular game, then on stage 3, you just randomly get a Space Groove emblem or get access to it. Maybe you get like, I forget what this augment's called, but it's the thing that gives you a spatula, and you have the other item to make the Space Groove emblem. You're going to be having a pretty good game, and that's going to be from tier and spatula. Unfortunately though, like tiers are pretty important in this comp because you want to get the mana items on Nunu, but always build the Space Groove emblem first because that is just going to be the most important thing ever. But the level 7 for this comp, or like the 7 Space Groove for this comp, you just add in the 2 other Space Grooves, and then you could drop some of your tanks. And this version works out really well if you are able to make it to the later levels, because I think that 7 Space Groove is just such a huge buff for all your carries that it's worth sacrificing Nunu for. Next build up we have is going to be the 6 Darkstar build. Again, you want the emblem for it. Couple of different versions out there. Aesol might be the better version right now. Xayah I find is too contested, even though she is still solid. And then Rogue is still pretty good, but I feel like Kaisa isn't as dominant as she once was before, so I like the Aesol one normally when I play this. You do Darkstar emblem plus Jeweled Gauntlet. Third item doesn't matter that much, but Guardbreaker or Rabadon's Death Cap are probably going to be the preferred items for you. Frontline can either be Nunu or Tahm Kench, same with many other comps in the game. Do we run that tank line in the other versions? No, we just run Nunu in the other versions, but you easily could do it in the other versions too, just because Cho'Gath is going to be a brawler as well. For other carries you can use, like Karma's nice in this comp. If you go snipers, obviously you do Jhin. If you do rogues, you do Kaisa. If you do play this version though, I highly recommend either getting a 3-star Xayah and playing it when you have a bunch of duplicators, or just trying to build into other legendaries in the late game. For example, you play around like Jhin or something like that. But this comp is dependent on the emblem because you need the 6 Dark Star power spike as fast as you can, and it's just really hard to do that without the emblem because Dark Star only has 6 units, and getting 6 specific units in a card game or a game that gives random units is pretty difficult to do. Next build up we have is going to be the 6 Mecha build. I like this build a lot because efficient if you have Radiant items, or if you have Artifact items, or if you have the Anima Squad items. The reason why it works out that way is because these units count as 2 units, so getting super items on them is just going to be a lot more efficient. It turns like 3 items into something like 6 items, you know? But I just love how the traits work out in this build. So you have like Ezreal, Urgot, and Mighty Mech all meched up, right? So you get 6 Mighty Mech from that. With 6 Mighty Mech, you get an extra unit slot. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units here. So that's level 9 because these 3 units are counted twice. And then you just get to fill pretty much everything you care about out. So you get Brawler, you get Conduit, you get Dark Star. So Dark Star, even though you're not playing Dark Star, 2 Dark Star is really nice because it gives like an execute effect to your whole team. You get Marauder, which is important if you get Urgot a little bit beefed up, and then Voyager is nice as like a team-wide buff. But pretty much what you want to do is concentrate in the early game on tank items and Ezreal items. So pretty much if you play AP, you can go for the other AP comps that we talked over already, such as AP Fast 9, but if you want to go for a level 8 roll down, or if you again get offered like artifact items or radiant items, then going into 6 Mecha is something that's very easy to do. And then once you get that, you could get some utility items. You need anti-heal plus magic penetration first, and then if you itemize Urgot, you want armor pen as well. Also, Urgot really likes Infinity Edge, so make sure you get that on him because he's really, really bad without it, but he is something that you worry about much, much later in the game because you're mainly focused on the Ezreal and the Mighty Mech. If you don't have those two, the rest of the comp does not really matter. But overall, pretty solid level 8 comp, really good with stuff like reinforcement, and yeah, if you get some special item, that's when you are more inclined to go for this. Next build up we have is the new comp. We have Primordian Jinx. This one runs with 3 Challengers, 3 Nova, 2 Brawler, 2 Marauder, and 2 Primordian. And the requirements for this comp is item augments, early copies, and high tempo. So pretty much if you're able to reach 3 item Jinx, Bel'Veth, and Akali, you're in great shape for a top 2. And this is the type of comp that you want to natural into stage 2, not something you force without copies. Because even though you can run Primordian at the start of the game and get extra unit copies, it only really works if you get it at the start of the game, right? So don't hard force it, just try to let it come to you. And in a world of 4 and 5 cost units being very dominant, it gives you another option to kind of use at 2-star. So again, it's going to be Akali and Jinx and Bel'Veth as the main carries, and then Xayah as one of your tanks. But pretty much in stage 1 and 2, play around early Jinx and Primordian, slam items obviously to keep tempo because that's like the most important thing to do with this comp. On stage 3-2, roll and stabilize, look to be strong on this stage with Jinx 2 plus upgrades, and you'll probably beat most stage 3 boards. On level 4, you continue to roll for 3 stars, and ideally hit everything by stage 4 or 5. And then after that, you want to level up to add in Ross because he's like a nice little bonus here. I know you don't run like that many traits, but what else are you supposed to put in? After that, continue leveling up and adding challenger units or legendaries to round out the comp. By the way, item priority for this build is going to be Jinx, then Bel'Veth, then Akali, then your tank. And for Jinx, it's going to be pure damage items. She gets a lot of attack speed from Challenger already, and then she gets precision from Akali from the Nova buff, meaning that like raw AD is going to be the best thing on her. That's why Death Blades are nice. And also, do not build Shojin on Jinx. I've seen some people do that, not that effective on her. Briar is nice for econ during stage 3 and early stage 4, but you definitely want to drop her eventually for something like Rost. Emblems are also pretty good in this comp because you can use a bunch of different ones here. Obviously, Challenger is going to be the one that fits the most naturally. And then Xayah is going to be used to eat all your random items that you hate. So pretty much if you get item components that don't really match up with your team, just slam some random item that is any bit tanky on Xayah. So again, with the Rod and Tier, it's going to be Crown Guard and the Protector's Vow, because literally everything else should be focused on damage items. Again, the priority is going to be Jinx items first, then Bel'Veth, then Akali. But that's pretty much how this comp works. You want to do a 2-cost reroll. Kind of talked about that already. And yeah, again, final reminder, this comp really only works if you are able to win the early round. So do not take econ augments with this. Don't take like a reroll augment. Don't take like trade sector, you know, take something that gives you a bit of power so that you are able to actually win streak in the early game. But that's going to be the S and A tier comps. Like obviously we still have the full B tier on the website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta, as we always have. Like Corki, Riven's here, Darkstar, Lissandra's here, a bunch of random stuff is here. But pretty much there are so many S and A tier comps that I would highly recommend playing for them. If I had to give out my like percent breakdown on how often you play each and every comp, Stargazer Xayah, you probably could play it in like, I mean, in a lot of games. So maybe like 25% of games. Really depends on if you get the good constellations or not. Gnar Printer, so if you play 20 games on a patch, that's going to be like 5 games. Gnar Printer, maybe 2 or 3 of those games. 2 Tanky Samira, you're probably only going to get offered that like once out of 20 games, but you take it every time you can get it. Vex Fast 9, you might win streak maybe like 3 games out of your 20. Brawler Yi, maybe you could get 2 games out of this, 2 to 3. Vanguard Fast 9, I'm going to loop in the same category as Vex Fast 9. Space Groove and Darkstar, I mean, it just depends when you get the emblems. Maybe you get them like 4 games combined or something like that. Are we almost at 20 yet? I think we are almost at 20. Whatever the leftovers are, it's going to be either the Mecha or Primordian Jinx. Mecha is in those Anma squad games, or if you get some insane Radiant item, maybe that's like 2 out of 20 games, and then Primordian Jinx is whenever you get the opener, maybe again like 2 out of 20 games. So well, however that adds up to 20, that's going to be what you're going to be trying to do in most of the cases this patch. Obviously, for any leftovers, you still can do like some of the other comps out there, but that's pretty much how I would approach the patch. But definitely check out the opener guide if you are confused on opening up in your game, because this is the most comprehensive guide on the early game out there. So they'll tell you like what units to hold, everything like that. But that's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.